Nice and early. Thank you all for being here. Super excited to be here with my gang to decipher the question, gold versus Bitcoin. Is it versus or is it both? So let's start with a fun fact. Who do you think owns more Bitcoins? Sorry, owns more gold or Bitcoins in America? Is it more gold or more Bitcoin today? Well, both, right? But Americans actually hold more Bitcoin than gold. 50 million Americans today hold Bitcoin versus 36.7 million Americans hold gold, right? And that's a very surprising fact, especially I think for the audience here. So gold bugs normally think that Bitcoin is a scam, and Bitcoiners think that gold is a pet rock. But the truth might be more interesting than that. So let's find out, by a show of hands, how many of you here actually hold gold? Right, me too. How many of you hold Bitcoin? Oh, that's impressive, that's cool. Okay, or how many of you are here just for the fight? You are, I know you are. All right, let's kick this off. To start, I want to ask our panelists, Bitcoin and gold are often seen as hedges against inflation, but they operate in very different ways. Which do you think better serves as a store of value for Americans and other Western countries around the world in the current economic climate, and why? Or in other words, who wins the best store of value, in your opinion? Let's start with you, Ethan.
Yeah, sure. So I think that the answer to that is Bitcoin. And that's because its fundamental properties differentiate it from gold. It was engineered to be perfect money, and so it's more scarce than gold. It has a fixed supply cap of 21 million coins. With gold, we don't actually truly know how much gold there is in the world. Have we already mined 1% of it, 50% of it, 10% of it? There's no way for us to know. Will we find gold at the bottom of the ocean? Currently, gold is inflating at about 2% a year. In other words, we mine about 2% of the total supply of gold a year, and because of compounding interest, that means that in just under 40 years, the total supply of gold in the world will double, and already has in the last 40 years. But with Bitcoin, you know that there's 21 million Bitcoin. The cap will be in 2140, and currently there are 20 million in supply, so there will only be 1 million more mined on a predictable schedule. And so that true scarcity, and that, well, more than that, that verifiable scarcity gives you the assurance that there can never be more and there will never be more. And that's what really gives Bitcoin its edge over gold. But then also, because it was engineered to fit our current economy. I mean, gold already failed in a way, because it wasn't practical to store, it wasn't practical to verify, it wasn't practical to divide, which is why it needed to be centralized. With Bitcoin, it's decentralized and it doesn't need to centralize. It's a cash system. It could be exchanged from me to you and you and you easily and quickly and cheaply across borders around the world at any time. And so that makes it ideal for our current day and age.
Dominic?
Well, if you're asking me which I think I'm going to make more money with in the coming years, my gold or my Bitcoin, I think the answer is pretty clearly Bitcoin. It's on a growth trajectory, it's on an adoption trajectory. But that's not to knock gold. And when, I advise my readers to own both gold and Bitcoin. And gold suits some people better and Bitcoin suits other people better. But I think when you're talking about the two, it's important to remember to distinguish in your mind that one is a physical asset. Gold is old. If you can't destroy gold, and gold was originally created in supernova explosions, and so it's thought that all the gold in the world that exists was created when the solar system itself was born. And that means you can't destroy it. So that also means that little bit of gold around your neck is not just older than the Earth itself, it is older than the solar system. And to touch that little bit of gold on your neck or your finger is as close as you will ever come in your life to touching eternity. And I think that's an incredibly profound thought. And you were talking about gold supply. If you compare population growth and gold supply in the world, they grow at exactly the same rate. And again, I think that's a profound thought, because that makes gold is natural law. And so gold is the most analog asset there is. And physical analog assets serve one purpose. But Bitcoin is a digital asset, and if you look at the growth in the world economies in the last 30 years or so, all the excitement, all the growth has come in the digital world. And that's why, and Bitcoin is this most, both gold and Bitcoin are bearer assets. They are money in and of themselves. They require nobody else's liability, and they have that in common. They're both anti-fiat vehicles, and they have that in common. And I just think gold and Bitcoin should be allies. But Bitcoin, as you said, if we're going into outer space, you're not going to be able to send gold to each other in outer space because it's just too heavy, even though we use gold to plate astronauts' visors and so on. But you'll be able to send Bitcoin to each other. It's infinitely more transferable. It has a much greater utility because of all its properties as a digital asset. So I think when you're thinking about the two, if you just distinguish between digital and physical, and that will give you the clarity you need. And physical assets have one purpose, and digital assets have another. Own both, but you'll make more money with your Bitcoin.
Perfect, thank you. Wolf, your take?
Thank you very much. I would just encourage the audience to think about, if you give the folks here that advocating for Bitcoin only a 1% chance that they might be right, then I think after this conversation, you want to go home and study this asset more, because it's truly transformational in my opinion. Because if Bitcoin has a chance to become not only a store of value, which it already is in my opinion, but also money, then the asynchronistic, asymmetric bet of a lifetime lays with Bitcoin, right? Because you have to see, what is the superior money? Money has been used for thousands of years as money. Because why? Because it's scarce, we heard for other reasons already. But there's other reasons. It is also not very portable. Bitcoin is infinitely portable. I can send you, theoretically, $1 billion without any bank in between, on an intermediary, on a Friday night, on a Saturday night, on a Sunday night, and it will be there within 10 minutes or even faster. Try to do that with gold, right? So you have the scarcity, you have the verifiability, it's portable, it's also much more divisible. Let's say there's at some point a hyperinflation, as the world has already seen over 51 times. Try to buy a hot dog with gold, right? You would have to slice it very, very thinly. With Bitcoin, I've bought a coffee, I've bought beer with it, it's entirely possible. And yes, it's true that gold has a lot of history, but we have seen something that people thought was a joke within 15 years to become a $1 trillion asset. So I do believe there is a lot of reasons for us to take it seriously and for us to study it.
Perfect, thank you. Ethan?
Adam.
Oh, Adam, sorry.
Yeah, so I love both assets. I love both monetary assets, and I think that the question is broken. And the reason I think that is, I have made a check this week, I've paid with cash this week, and I've sent a money wire this week, I've used Venmo this week. Nobody is coming up to me and saying, checks, yes or no? And this is the same question. These are two critical monetary technologies for very different purposes. Most of the money in Bitcoin right now is betting on its expansion, and it is a bet on that. I believe in that bet because I think that people should have the absolute right to send money to others without a bank intermediary who challenges that. And I just talked to a gold dealer yesterday who tried to send a client $5 million, and the bank stopped it. Think about that. Totally legal transaction.
Yeah.
That's the value of Bitcoin. The value of gold is for saving. Because at no point in 2,500 years has gold not been valuable, and it's only grown more valuable. And there's this concept that gold doesn't appreciate in value. And they used to say, when I started this business, oh, you could buy a nice suit. I've never bought a $3,400 suit. Maybe I'm just not fancy enough. There are billions of people who want to own gold. It is truly international. And the biggest buyers of gold today are precisely the money printers. Central banks are buying it at the fastest clip, and they know that the physical asset of final settlement that has always been valuable will continue to be valuable. And what I think about is not my Bitcoin balance in 6 months, but to your question, I have a daughter, and I hope I have grandchildren. I'm looking at a 10, 20, 30, 50-year horizon. The best bet for that, for true savings, is what has worked for thousands of years, and that's gold.
Thank you, Adam. Generational wealth. Dominic, you've been writing extensively on both gold and Bitcoin. What do you foresee for the next decade in terms of the role that they're going to play in the changing financial system?
Well, I think if you look at gold's historical role, you've got to, when you think about money, you've got to think of the store of value purpose of money and the medium of exchange purpose of money. And gold hasn't ever really been medium of exchange. Maybe under a gold standard, which was an exchange system built on top of the metal. But it's, you know, we use gold for high value transactions. But, you know, copper, silver, nickel, these kind of metals we use for the everyday transactions. So gold's purpose is to store wealth. And if the very first metal that human beings used, long before civilization, was gold. We found it in riverbeds and so on. It's a native metal. It appears in its natural state. And, you know, we wore it. We used it as reward. We used it as a gift. We used it as an expression of gratitude. In other words, and we used it to decorate ourselves, which is a form of wealth storage. So we have an instinct for gold, for the beauty of the gold. We're attracted by its shine. So there's a famous quote, the oldest commercial instinct of the human race is for gold. And so that's not going to change. Now, you mentioned central banks. 10 years ago, central bank holdings were roughly 10% of their net assets were in gold. That's doubled over the last 10 years. It's now 20%. I think it's going to double again over the next 10 years. China's accumulating at an extraordinary rate. If you look at the amount of gold that China has mined and the amount of gold that China has imported, and you put them all together, and you can get a rough figure from this if you look at Shanghai Gold Exchange withdrawals, roughly 30,000 tons of gold has gone to China in the last 25 years, and none of that gold has been exported because you can't export gold from China. And that compares with America's 8,000 tons. And if you guess that maybe half of that gold is now state-owned, all mining in China is state-owned, you arrive at a figure of roughly 15,000 tons of gold in China. And in this age of de-dollarization, why is it accumulating so much gold? If ever China has designs on the yuan being the global reserve currency and rivaling the US dollar, there has never been in all history a global reserve currency that did not start out backed by gold and sometimes silver. They all got debased into oblivion. So that tells you what China's ambitions are. And then obviously since the confiscation of Russian assets after the invasion of Ukraine, we're just seeing more and more accumulation by central banks as they de-dollarize. But it's very hard to send gold, as we said. And I mean, I know Russia paid China in gold for some drones Russia paid Iran in gold for some drones that it bought. They're probably really bad drones, but anyway, it bought them with gold. And it sent gold by plane from Moscow to Iran. I mean, just how impractical is that? Bitcoin is so much more practical. Now, we don't know, I'll finish very quickly, we don't know how much gold America actually has. The long-awaited audit never actually happened. But funnily enough, if that gold isn't there, America's embracing of Bitcoin is one of the few things that could actually save it and save the dollar. And I'll finish with I mean, Bitcoin, I sent a transaction of 1 sat the other day as a test, 1 sat. That would be 1/20th of 1p. I think it's incredible that you can send a payment that small, and obviously you can send a payment of billions of dollars without anyone's permission. It's an incredibly profound and exciting technology. But here's my joke that I'll finish on. The head of security goes to the US president. He says, "Mr. President, there is no gold in Fort Knox." And the president says, "What do you mean there's no gold in Fort Knox?" And the head of security says, "There is no gold in Fort Knox." And the president says, "Double the guard."
Thank you. Ethan, some argue that Bitcoin's volatility is unreliable as a currency, makes it unreliable as a currency, while others see gold as outdated in the digital age that we're in. How do you address these criticisms?
Okay, so first of all, I think that the criticisms of volatility are overstated. As Michael Saylor likes to say, volatility is vitality. Would you rather own something that's, yes, fluctuating a lot, but it's alive, there's interest in it, there's large trading volume, or something that's just dead and keeping up with inflation or barely outpacing inflation? As Adam said, his time horizon, for passing down his wealth, his hard-earned wealth to his kids, is 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. Well, I think the same of Bitcoin. If you're going to hold Bitcoin for 40 years, why do you care if it has a 30% drawdown over a couple of months? It doesn't matter. And so Bitcoin is the ultimate correction to time preferences. It reorients our fast-paced, sort of just immediate gratification world towards thinking of the long term. And so on the vitality side, I don't think that that detracts from Bitcoin, but the vitality is going down. As Bitcoin is gaining institutional support, like the United States recently had the Strategic Reserve Executive Order, and you see corporations buying Bitcoin, and a lot of different interest in Bitcoin, then and as it just grows as an asset, the volatility is going down. And so as it continues to monetize, the volatility will go down and it will stabilize. But I think that the volatility is actually a great buying opportunity because it has more upside volatility than downside volatility. Would you rather own something that is volatile but appreciates in historic ways than own something that's more predictable but doesn't appreciate that much? And so, I think that the answer is that you suck up some volatility and you reorient your time preferences. And what was the second part on
just
freedom?
Gold being outdated for a digital age.
Yeah, well, you can't, in order to verify it, you either have to melt it down or drill through it or use imperfect machines. With Bitcoin, I could see my Bitcoin right now within a couple minutes on chain, I send a transaction within a couple of minutes, I get final settlement. To send gold around the world, you need armed guards, ships, planes, armed trucks. It's very expensive, cumbersome. So yes, I think that gold is outdated for this digital age. Just the other day, Tether sent billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin to 21 Capital, and the transaction fee was $2. And it took 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Final settlement.
Digital age, and you don't need security guards on Fort Knox. Wolf, from a libertarian perspective, how do Bitcoin and gold compare in terms of promoting individual sovereignty and protecting against government overreach in the monetary policy?
Great question. First, I would also like to acknowledge this panel that we're actually discussing Bitcoin and not cryptocurrencies in general.
Right.
So I would like for you to only focus on Bitcoin and not of the other nonsense that's out there. Because there's a lot of scams out there and it's really, really dangerous. It's the Wild West, and while Bitcoin might be volatile, there's so many rug pulls and other really bad things out there, so I really appreciate that. First, I would say we all have to realize that whatever we're doing with our money, if it's cash, if it's gold, if it's Bitcoin, we're taking a risk. The risk with the dollar being, right now we have $37 trillion of debt and $120 trillion of dollars in unfunded liabilities. Where do you think this will head? What do you think the future is of that? So that is hugely a risk. And then if it really becomes bad in America, we have seen already in 1933 with Executive Order 6102 that gold was confiscated by the president just by executive order, just by the stroke of a pen. And people had to exchange their gold against that. That risk exists. Can it happen again? It has happened in many countries around the world, not only America. Now, with Bitcoin, you have that risk as well, but you can protect your Bitcoin much better than you can protect your gold or your fiat money. In the way that, for instance, you can set up multi-signature setups where you can give somebody, a relative that you have someone in a different country, the signing rights, and you have the signing rights, and you need 2 people out of 3 to allow a Bitcoin transaction. So if somebody grabs you and say, give me all your Bitcoin, they can't. So there's much more security involved there, and you can basically think about Bitcoin as gold, but with a brain and Wi-Fi.
Beautiful. Adam, adoption is a key challenge for alternative currencies. We may be far from the adoption of gold or Bitcoin as medium of exchanges in the West, but let's assume this trajectory is probable in today's reality. What practical steps can be taken to make gold more accessible and usable for everyday transactions in America?
So gold is transactable. The problem is that we have an absolute scandal going on in the gold industry right now. And that scandal is that the coin is broken. Coinage for 2,000 years was a guaranteed unit with a guaranteed security. And what's happening right now is Chinese mints are counterfeiting US gold currency, and you can buy it on the Chinese equivalent on Alibaba for 99 cents for a $3,400 coin. And I have talked to Secret Service agents who say, we are doing nothing about this. That is outrageous, and the reason they're doing nothing about it is because they don't know what to do. So even gold dealers don't trust the gold that comes in. This is a broken system. Valorum has fixed that by having everyday individual units of gold from $200 to $500, the exact things that mirror paper money, making it spendable again in over 3,000 stores in America, but this is just the beginning. The question is, when will governments protect their citizens by adopting an appropriate coinage for the 21st century? We have the technology, and we are bringing that out. We've done limited issues with 7 countries, but much more is to come because the system is broken, and a gold standard has never existed without a coin that allows me to draw from a depository, draw from a bank, and put it where I trust it. And that has to be available to every individual. The technology is there, and we're merely at the beginning of adoption.
Valorum is your company, right?
Valorum is our company.
Can
and
you
if you
show the note?
Absolutely. So, state of Texas next week.
Well done.
Please come see us.
Excellent. All right, guys, we're heading towards the end of this panel. So last words from each one of you about that debate. Is it gold versus Bitcoin? Is it both? What do we leave these people with if they're looking at their portfolio, their investments, and also their freedom and their sovereignty? So quick round.
Yeah, so when it comes to, I think that Bitcoin clearly wins here. As Adam just said, there's even gold traders are having a difficulty verifying counterfeit gold from China. There's no counterfeit Bitcoin. It's never happened. And so I do think that eventually Bitcoin will monetize. And when it comes to freedom, Bitcoin is the ultimate freedom money, and you may want to get some in case it catches on, in the famous words of Satoshi.
There are other counterfeit issues in the world of Bitcoin, and there are lots of scams and lots of other dangers. And I take your point about the volatility, and a lot of people like it. But actually, if you own, a lot of people do not want volatility, and they just want safety and security and an easy life. And so if you have a balanced portfolio with some gold and some Bitcoin, one of the things that you happen, particularly if you reallocate, is the gold strips out the volatility of the Bitcoin. So my advice is, for reasons of the decline of fiat currency, for financial reasons, for political reasons, for moral reasons, and for philosophical reasons, own both.
Excellent. Wolf?
Bitcoin is the single best shot at achieving liberty in our lifetime. It's risky, it's different, but there's definitely opportunity there.
Oh, music! Adam, last words.
Buy both, think about why.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
When I'm near